Engines roared like war drums as 120 bikers flooded a quiet neighborhood. Chrome flashing, leather glinting, every window slamming shut except one. Behind that single curtain, Naomi Brooks held her daughter close and whispered, "They're coming for me." Her words were not of fear, but of disbelief. The morning light poured through a crack in the curtain, reflecting on hundreds of helmets lined along Brook Street. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Whitaker gasped behind her lace curtain. Mr. Harris shouted into his phone, his voice shaking, "Yes, officer, there's a gang outside. Yes, right now!" But the roar began to fade, replaced by a silence too heavy to be safe. Then one man stepped off his motorcycle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his beard streaked with gray, his black vest covered with patches that spoke of miles and years. Ryder Cole. He removed his helmet, placed it on the seat, and looked up toward Naomi's window, as if he could see right through the wall. Then, with a slow motion that silenced even the whispering, he bowed his head. One by one, the other bikers followed, standing in quiet formation until the entire street was filled with stillness. And in that stillness, the sound of a child's breath trembled against Naomi's chest. "Mommy?" Leah whispered. "Why are they here?" Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. Because sometimes kindness comes back louder than thunder. The street had no idea what that meant yet. They only saw the fear, rows of bikes, jackets marked with symbols they didn't understand. But 2 days earlier, Naomi hadn't been anyone worth noticing. She was just another mother walking home from the late shift, shoes worn thin, counting the last $9 she owned. That night, the city hummed its usual song of exhaustion and quiet dreams. The neon lights of a corner gas station flickered, humming like tired bees. Naomi's steps were slow, her breath visible in the cold air. The bills in her pocket were supposed to buy Leah breakfast in the morning. Maybe a small treat, maybe not. The rent was still $180 short. The inhaler for Leah's asthma was almost empty, and the car, broken for a month, sat like a forgotten promise in the lot behind her building. But still, she whispered the same thing she wrote every night in her little journal. 3 things to be thankful for. 1. Leah is safe. 2. I still have work tomorrow. 3. Tomorrow is another chance. As she cut through the gas station parking lot, the night cracked open with a single sound, a cough that didn't stop. She turned. Under the harsh fluorescent light, a man leaned against his motorcycle, his face pale, his body trembling. His vest read Hope Road. He tried to speak, but his breath came out jagged, a desperate fight against his own chest. Naomi froze. Inside the store, Trevor, the attendant, looked up from behind the counter. "Don't get involved," he shouted through the glass. "Those bikers are trouble." Another man, older, passing by with a bag of chips, shook his head. "Walk away, lady. You got a kid to think about." He drove off without looking back. Naomi stood there alone, the night pressing against her ears. The man collapsed. His head hit the pavement. His hands twitched once, then fell still. For a moment, Naomi couldn't move. She could hear her own pulse, a heavy drum in her chest. Her grandmother's voice came back, clear as breath. "Kindness costs nothing, baby, and sometimes it's all we've got to give." Naomi looked at the $9 in her hand, then at the man gasping for air. Her fingers trembled, but her decision didn't. She ran inside, grabbed a small bottle of aspirin and a bottle of water, and slammed them on the counter. "How much?" she asked. $6.50, Trevor said, eyeing her like she'd lost her mind. She handed him the bills, took the change without counting, and ran back outside. The man's lips had turned gray. She dropped to her knees, tore open the bottle, and placed 2 tablets in his mouth. "Chew," she said. "Come on, you're going to be okay." She lifted his head gently, pouring water to his lips until he swallowed. Sirens wailed in the distance, but the sound felt too far away. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't you dare give up now." His eyes opened for half a second. "What's your name?" he rasped. "Naomi. Naomi Brooks," she said. "You saved me," he whispered. "Not yet," she replied, "but I'm trying." The ambulance arrived. A younger man with the same vest jumped off his bike and ran toward them. "Ryder!" he shouted, falling to his knees beside the man. "Oh God, Ryder, hold on!" He looked up at Naomi. "You helped him?" "He needed help," she said simply. The paramedic rushed over, checked Ryder's pulse, and nodded. "Smart move, giving him aspirin. You probably saved his life." Naomi didn't feel proud. She only felt relief and a strange calm, like a storm had just passed through her hands. Before they lifted Ryder onto the stretcher, he reached out, his grip weak but certain. "Tell them Ryder sent you." She nodded, though she didn't know who "them" was. The younger man pressed a plain white card into her palm, a small emblem, a crown with wings. "Call this number tomorrow," he said. "Please." Then they were gone. The flashing red lights faded into the night. Naomi stood alone under the humming lights, the card shaking in her hand. $6 gone. A life maybe saved. She could already hear what people would say. Foolish woman. Doesn't she know better? But she couldn't regret it. She walked home in silence, the change rattling in her pocket like proof that she'd done the right thing. Later, when Leah was asleep, Naomi opened her journal again. She added a new line beneath her usual 3. 4. I helped someone tonight. She didn't know that across town, Ryder Cole was lying in a hospital bed, whispering to his friend, "Gather everyone." She didn't know that in less than 48 hours, her street would shake under 120 engines, and the sound of gratitude louder than any thunder she'd ever known. Morning came too early. The alarm buzzed at 4:45, and Naomi Brooks pressed it off before the second ring. The room was small and quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when nothing in the world can afford to break. The wallpaper had peeled from the corners, and the ceiling fan clicked with every turn. Leah was still asleep, curled under a blanket that had seen too many winters. Naomi stood for a moment, watching her breathe. That soft rhythm was the only luxury she had. She moved through the kitchen barefoot. The floor was cold. On the counter sat half an apple and a few toast crusts, leftovers from last night. She arranged them on a plate like it was a breakfast meant for royalty. When Leah woke, rubbing her eyes and smiling the same way she always did, Naomi forced her own smile to match it. "Morning, baby," she whispered. "Morning, Mommy. What's for breakfast?" "Something special," Naomi said. "Apple toast." Leah giggled, proud of the name. "You make it sound fancy." "That's the secret," Naomi said softly. "If you name it right, it tastes right." Leah ate happily, and for a moment, the world felt full again. But when Naomi opened the cabinet, it was bare. No cereal, no milk, just one box of tea and the empty jar where she kept coins. She stared at the jar until her reflection blurred. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her old notebook on the windowsill. Every night before bed, And sometimes when the morning felt too heavy, she wrote 3 things to be grateful for. She opened to a blank page and read the lines from last night. Leah is safe. I helped someone. Tomorrow is a new day. Naomi touched the page and whispered, "Then I guess this is the tomorrow." The world outside hadn't changed, but she had. On her walk to the laundromat, the city was still waking up. A soft mist rolled across the sidewalks, and the early buses groaned past, filled with tired faces that looked just like hers. Every few blocks, someone nodded, another worker starting another long day. It was an unspoken brotherhood of survival. At the laundromat, the smell of detergent hit her as soon as she pushed the door open. She tied her apron and began folding sheets in neat piles. Hospital whites, denim blues, soft pink pillowcases from homes she would never see. 8 hours of repetition and the silence between the spin cycles gave her too much time to think. Linda, no, Rosa Fields now, slid beside her, setting down a basket of towels. Rosa was twice Naomi's age, but she carried herself like someone who'd already made peace with the world. "You look like your mind's halfway to somewhere else," Rosa said gently. Naomi smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "That's dangerous this early," Rosa teased. "You thinking about that biker story I saw on the local news?" Naomi froze. "What do you mean?" "They said a woman helped a man from that Hope Road group at the gas station. Saved his life, gave him aspirin. Sounded a lot like you." Naomi tried to laugh it off. "Aspirin's easy to find. Could be anyone." Rosa gave her a knowing look. "You did the right thing. Some people never even try. You keep doing you." Naomi folded another shirt and nodded. "Mrs. Whitaker doesn't think so. She told me I was asking for trouble." Rosa scoffed. "Mrs. Whitaker thinks thunderstorms are government experiments. Let her talk." The rest of the shift passed quietly. Naomi kept her head down, folding, stacking, folding again. But every few minutes her thoughts slipped back to that night. The hum of the lights, the weight of the man's head in her lap, the way he had whispered her name before the sirens drowned it out. She hadn't even told anyone that he'd reached for her hand and said, "Tell them Ryder sent you." At 2 p.m, she clocked out and started the long walk to the diner. The afternoon sun turned the cracked pavement golden. Her shoes, worn and thin, slapped the ground with tired rhythm. When she arrived, she bought a small coffee with the coins left in her pocket and sat in the back booth. For 10 minutes, she let herself breathe. Dean Parker's business card was still tucked into her apron pocket. White, simple, a crown with wings. No address, no company name, just a number. She traced the symbol with her finger. "Call this number tomorrow," he had said. It was today. She took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. She typed a message. "This is Naomi Brooks. You gave me a card last night." She hesitated, thumb hovering over the send button, then pressed it before she could change her mind. The message sent. A few seconds later, her phone began to ring. Unknown number. She didn't answer. The ringing stopped, and a voicemail notification appeared. Her heart thudded as she pressed play. "Naomi, this is Dean. Ryder wants to see you today. Please come to Murphy's Diner on 5th Street at 3. It's important." Naomi sat frozen for a moment, the phone still in her hand. She wasn't sure if she was more afraid or curious. Rosa appeared from behind the counter. "You okay, honey?" "They want to meet me," Naomi said quietly. Rosa's eyebrows lifted. "Then go. Maybe it's a thank you, or maybe it's free coffee. Either way, you've earned it." Naomi tried to laugh, but the sound came out small. She checked the clock. 2:15. 5th Street wasn't far, but her heart was racing faster than her feet could walk. On her way out, she saw two motorcycles parked across the street. Their engines were off, but their presence was unmistakable. Both riders nodded to her as she passed. No words, just quiet acknowledgement. When the bus turned the final corner, she saw them, rows of motorcycles lined up outside Murphy's diner, chrome gleaming under the afternoon light. Her stomach dropped. There must have been 50 riders already waiting, all dressed in black, arms crossed, silent. For a second, she thought about staying on the bus, about pretending she'd never gotten that message. But something stronger than fear made her stand. She stepped off and began to walk toward the diner. The air felt thick, the kind that makes sound move slower. People on the sidewalk stopped to stare. Naomi pushed open the door, and every head turned. The diner was full, men and women in matching vests, sitting shoulder to shoulder, cups of untouched coffee in front of them. No one spoke. No music played. Just the low hum of the ceiling fan and the sound of her shoes against the floor. Then, slowly, one man stood. Another followed. Then another. In seconds, every rider in the diner was on their feet. It was like a wave of quiet respect rolling toward her. Naomi froze, unsure what to do. Dean appeared from the back, smiling gently. "Naomi," he said, "thank you for coming." The silence was strange but not threatening. It felt like standing inside a heartbeat. Dean led her through the rows of standing riders to the far booth. Ryder Cole sat there, looking stronger than she remembered, but still pale. When he saw her, he stood, every movement deliberate. "Naomi Brooks," he said, voice gravelly but warm. "Sit with me." She slid into the booth, her hands still trembling. The bikers remained standing until Ryder nodded, then they all sat again in perfect unison. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn photograph. It showed a younger rider beside a woman and a small girl with bright eyes and curls like Leah's. "Her name was Lily," he said quietly. "She was 7. Cancer took her before we could get the treatment in time. After she died, I made a promise. Anyone who shows kindness when they've got nothing left, I help them. That's what she would have wanted." Naomi's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. Ryder leaned forward. "Tomorrow morning, something's going to happen. Don't be afraid." "What do you mean?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "You'll see." He stood, placed money on the table for their untouched coffee, and walked out with Dean. The other riders rose again as he passed, forming a silent corridor that Naomi walked through without understanding. When she stepped back into the sunlight, she felt the world tilt again, the same way it had when those engines first roared. Whatever tomorrow held, it was already on its way. The morning light came with a sound Naomi Brooks would never forget. It was not birdsong, not traffic, not rain. It was the rumble of engines, dozens, then hundreds, each one carrying the weight of a promise made the night before. She shot up from bed, her heart pounding. The clock read 7:30. Leah stirred beside her, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mommy, what's that noise?" Naomi's answer came out as a whisper. "Engines, baby." She walked to the window and froze. Her street was lined with motorcycles, rows of gleaming chrome, black jackets, and faces hidden behind helmets. She counted in disbelief. Not 10, not 20, at least 100, maybe more. The roar rolled through every wall. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open. Across the street, Mrs. Whitaker stood on her porch with her phone to her ear. "Yes, officer," she said, voice trembling. "There's a gang outside my house." Next door, Mr. Harris ran toward Naomi's apartment, his face flushed. "Naomi, what did you do? You brought trouble to this block?" Neighbors stepped out one by one, gathering like storm clouds. Mothers pulled their children closer. Someone shouted, "Those people are dangerous!" Another said, "They shouldn't be here." Leah clung to her mother's arm, her small hands shaking. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" Naomi knelt and looked into her daughter's eyes. "No, sweet girl. You didn't do anything wrong." But her own voice wavered. She could feel the fear thickening around them, the weight of 100 wrong assumptions pressing down. The sound of the engines faded to silence all at once, like a conductor had lifted his hand. Then, from the front of the formation, Dean Parker stepped forward. His voice carried across the street, calm and steady. "We're not here to hurt anyone," he said. "We're here to thank her." He pointed toward Naomi's porch. The crowd turned. Mrs. Whitaker frowned. "Thank her? For what?" Dean looked toward the truck that had just pulled up behind the bikes. Its door opened slowly, and Ryder Cole stepped out. He wasn't wearing his helmet. His eyes found Naomi instantly. He looked stronger now, the color back in his face, the air of a man who had come to finish something that mattered. He stood tall, one hand resting on the truck door, the other holding his heart like it still remembered that night. "You don't know me," Ryder said, his voice rough but clear. "But 2 nights ago, I stopped breathing on the pavement of a gas station not far from here. People walked by. They saw a jacket, not a man. They thought I wasn't worth saving." He turned toward Naomi, his expression softening. But she saw me. She had $9 left to her name, her daughter's breakfast money, and she spent it on the medicine that saved my life. "That's why we're here." The crowd murmured. The tension cracked but didn't break. "We run Hope Road Foundation," Ryder continued. "We build homes, pay medical bills, help families when the system forgets them. We've done it for 3,600 families over 20 years. Maybe some of you already know us." From somewhere in the crowd, a voice called out, "Hope Road? You helped my cousin in Detroit. Miguel Harris, the veteran. You paid for his therapy." Mr. Harris blinked, stunned. "That's true," he said quietly. Another woman stepped forward. "You paid for my son's surgery 2 years ago." And then another voice. "You saved my grandmother's house from foreclosure." The murmuring changed. Fear gave way to recognition. Neighbors looked at each other, realizing that the people they had been afraid of were the same ones who had quietly helped their families. Mrs. Whitaker lowered her phone and pressed a hand over her mouth. Ryder smiled faintly. "Looks like you already know us after all." He walked toward Naomi's porch. The crowd parted, the sound of his boots steady against the cracked pavement. When he stopped in front of her, he looked not just at Naomi but at everyone around. "You saw the jackets and thought you knew what we were. But this woman didn't see the patches or the stories. She saw a man dying and did what no one else would. She saw a person first. That's the world I want to live in. That's the world Hope Road was built for." The silence that followed was heavier than the roar had been. Then Mr. Harris took a step forward. His voice broke slightly. "I judged you before you even spoke. I was wrong." He extended his hand. Ryder shook it firmly. One by one, neighbors came forward. The same mouths that had shouted in fear now whispered apologies. "We're sorry, Naomi. You were braver than all of us. We should have trusted you." Naomi could barely speak. Leah clutched her leg, eyes wide but calm. For the first time, She wasn't afraid. Ryder reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. "You gave me a second chance," he said. "Let me give you one." He handed it to Naomi. Inside was a check for $28,000. Her breath caught. "I can't take this," she said softly. "You can," Ryder replied. "It's for rent, bills, groceries, whatever you need. And that's not all." He handed her a letter printed on clean paper with a golden emblem of wings. Hope Road Foundation would like to offer you a full-time position as a community coordinator. Steady income, health coverage from your first day, and space to keep helping others. You've already proven you know how. Naomi stared at the letter, her eyes welling. "I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," Dean said with a grin. The crowd broke into applause. Some clapped through tears. Even Mrs. Whitaker joined in, laughing as she wiped her eyes. "Baby, you showed us what real courage looks like," she said, pulling Naomi into a hug. Then Ryder reached into his pocket again and held out a small set of car keys. "We found your old sedan in the impound lot. Fixed it up. It's around the corner." Naomi's hand flew to her mouth. "You didn't have to do that." "We did," Ryder said, "because kindness doesn't stop where gratitude begins. It keeps going." A large trailer truck pulled forward. Its back door swung open to reveal boxes, groceries, furniture, toys, and a small bed with a pink blanket folded neatly on top. Leah gasped and ran toward it, her voice trembling with joy. "Mommy, they brought me a bed." Naomi laughed through tears. "Yes, baby, a real bed." She turned back to the crowd. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Ryder said. "You reminded us why we started this in the first place." Neighbors who had locked their doors an hour ago now stepped forward to help. Mr. Harris carried boxes. Mrs. Whitaker directed where the furniture should go. The young mother from 2 doors down brought lemonade for the workers. Fear had turned into something else, something Naomi hadn't seen on this street in years. Community. As the last box disappeared into her apartment, Ryder walked over, his boots dusty, his eyes kind. "Tomorrow we start planning something bigger," he said. Naomi tilted her head. "Bigger?" He nodded. "A community center, right here on this block. We'll call it Brooks Haven." Naomi laughed softly, shaking her head in disbelief. "You can't do that." "We can," Ryder said, smiling. "And we will. You saved my life with $9 and a choice. The least I can do is help you save others." The engines started again, but this time they didn't sound like thunder. They sounded like a heartbeat. Noon came with the kind of quiet that feels wrong for a place like Murphy's Diner. Normally, the lunch rush filled the air with clattering plates, whirring milkshake blenders, and the soft chorus of regulars arguing gently about baseball or weather. But today, the moment Naomi pushed open the chrome-trimmed door, she stepped into a silence so complete, it felt as if someone had pressed pause on the world. Nearly every booth was occupied. Dozens of riders, men and women she'd only glimpsed in brief snapshots the night before, sat in pristine rows. Jackets hung neatly from chairbacks, the winged crown gleaming from every patch. Coffee cups sat untouched. Forks hovered above plates. No one moved. The bell above the door chimed once, a tiny sound swallowed instantly by stillness. Then it happened. One biker near the window stood. Not abruptly, not with force, simply rose as if something sacred had entered. The person next to him followed, then the next. A ripple moved across the diner, table by table, a quiet wave of bodies rising to their feet. Not a salute, not intimidation. Something closer to respect. Slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Naomi froze, half inside, half outside the doorway. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd stepped into the wrong place. Maybe she'd wandered into someone else's life entirely. Her pulse kicked in her throat. She clutched the strap of her thrifted purse, feeling suddenly exposed under the fluorescent lights. Ryder Cole was seated in a corner booth, a blanket over his lap, stitches along his temple, and a soft pallor beneath the oxygen the hospital sent him home with. When he saw her, small, startled, framed by the doorway, he lifted a hand, a gentle beckoning gesture. "Come in," he said, voice raw but warm. "Please." The sound broke the tension like a spoon tapping a glass. The riders sat back down at once, not in unison, but with the soft rustle of leather and denim settling into place. The diner resumed breathing again. Naomi exhaled shakily and stepped further inside. Each table she passed, people dipped their heads slightly. Not dramatic bows, just quiet acknowledgments. The kind someone might offer a person who had done something rare and good. When she reached Ryder's booth, Dean Parker slid aside so she could take a seat. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. Ryder pulled a small photograph from his jacket pocket. It was creased at the edges, handled too often. A little girl smiled from it, missing front tooth, sun-bright curls, arms wrapped around a dog almost bigger than she was. "This is Lily," Ryder said. "My daughter." Naomi softened immediately. "She's beautiful. She was 7 when she passed." His throat tightened, but he didn't look away. "A heart condition. Could have been helped if we'd caught it sooner. I spent years angry at the world, blaming everything, everyone. Then one night, someone did for me what you did yesterday. They helped without asking who I was." A breath worked out of him, painful but steady. "That stranger told me, if you want Lily's memory to live clean, you give back clean. So we built something. We called it Lily's Legacy, a promise to meet kindness with help that matters." Naomi sat quietly, fingers laced together. She had never imagined her $9 choice connected to a story so heavy and tender. Dean leaned forward. "Most folks only see jackets, engines, noise. But this group, we've paid for surgeries, rebuilt homes after fires, got veterans into stable housing, helped grandparents raising kids. Hundreds of families over the years." Ryder met her gaze. "Yesterday, you didn't see a jacket. You saw a person." Her eyes stung. "I just did what I hoped someone would do for me, if it were me on the ground. That's why we're here," he said, "to make sure you know it mattered." Dean checked his watch. "There's something else. Ryder wants you prepared. Tomorrow morning. Noise is going to come your way, but not the kind you're thinking." Naomi blinked. "What kind of noise?" Ryder offered a tired smile. "The kind made by gratitude with engines." She tried to laugh it off, but a fine shiver went through her. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" "Yeah," Ryder said, "but also a little bit terrify you." Dean chuckled under his breath. "We'll make it clear. No harm, no chaos, no pressure, just presence. You gave the day a different ending for our brother. We want your street to understand the truth of that." Murphy, the diner owner, approached with refilled cups and a plate of blueberry pie. Naomi wasn't sure who ordered it, but the warm smell floated up like reassurance. Ryder nudged it toward her. "You've had a hard couple days," he murmured. "Pie helps." She laughed softly. "My grandmother used to say that." "Smart woman," Dean said. When Naomi finally left the diner, she carried 2 things she hadn't expected: a lingering warmth in her chest, and a small, clean fear swirling under it. Outside, the afternoon sun had softened the asphalt heat. She stepped toward her bus stop, rehearsing in her mind what she'd tell Leah about today. At the corner, she heard engines start. Not loud, just two. She turned and saw a pair of riders pulling helmets on. They didn't approach her, didn't speak, didn't hover. They simply followed at a respectful distance as she boarded her bus, ensuring she got on safely, then peeled away to take their own route. Naomi sat by the window, watching them dissolve into traffic. Not protectiveness she didn't ask for. Not surveillance. Just a quiet escort through a world that didn't always feel safe for a woman alone. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Delaney. Leah's fine, sweet girl. Drew me a whole picture book while she waited. Naomi's throat tightened as she typed a thank you. She leaned back in her seat, the city drifting past in muted colors. Something was coming tomorrow. Something big. Yet for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel entirely alone in the world. Somewhere behind her, engines hummed like a low promise. The next morning broke with a sound so violent it felt like the sky itself had cracked open. Engines, dozens of them, rolled through Brook Street like a rising storm. Naomi Brooks woke with a start, heart pounding before her eyes were even open. For one confused second, she thought someone was pounding on her door. Then she heard it again, unmistakable and overwhelming. The deep, layered thunder of motorcycles arriving in force. Leah jerked awake beside her, small hands flying to her ears. "Mommy, what's happening?" Naomi swallowed, fighting down her own rush of panic. "Stay close to me," she whispered, gathering her daughter into her arms as she crossed the small living room. Each step felt heavier than the last. She parted the curtain with trembling fingers. Her breath caught. The street was flooded. Motorcycles packed the pavement in long rows, stretching from the corner store all the way to the cracked fire hydrant at the far end. Chrome gleamed beneath the early sun. Black jackets formed a wall of quiet presence. Helmets hung from handlebars like steady sentinels. 120 riders, maybe more. It felt like the world had multiplied overnight, and every neighbor had seen it. Across the street, Mrs. Whitaker stood frozen on her porch, one hand pressed to her heart, the other clutching her phone. "Yes, officer," she said shakily into the receiver. "No, I'm not imagining it. The whole block is surrounded." Next door, Mr. Harris ran outside in slippers, eyes wide. "Naomi," he shouted. "What did you do? Did you invite them here? Are they after you? Are they after your child?" Windows flew open, doors slammed with nervous force. People rushed out wearing robes, pajamas, fear in their eyes. Someone muttered, "This is how trouble starts." Another whispered, "She brought them to our children." A third said, "I knew she was mixed up with the wrong people." The sting hit Naomi harder than she expected, not because their words were cruel, but because they were spoken with certainty. Certainty that she had done something wrong. Leah pressed her face into Naomi's sweater, trembling. "Mommy," she whispered, "are we in danger?" Naomi knelt, gripping her daughter's shoulders gently. "Look at me, baby. We are not in danger. People just don't understand yet." But her own voice faltered, and the crowd heard that. Whispers sharpened. "See? Even she's scared. This is exactly how those gangs operate. You can't trust anyone in those jackets." Naomi stood slowly, her hands shaking as she faced the growing mass of neighbors. She wanted to explain. She wanted to tell them everything. that she'd only helped a stranger who needed air and water, that she had done what she wished someone would do for her. But the words stuck in her throat. Fear listens to fear more than it listens to truth. The engines cut off, one by one, until the street fell into a silence that felt like held breath. The riders didn't move. They simply stood beside their bikes, waiting, not menacing, not demanding, just waiting. Then a familiar figure stepped forward through the quiet, a steady presence cutting through the morning haze. Dean Parker. He lifted his voice, calm and clear. "We're not here to frighten anyone," he said. "We're here because this woman saved a life." The crowd wavered. Some backed up, some leaned in, but no one spoke. Then the truck doors opened, and Ryder Cole stepped out. Not with force, not with spectacle, just a man walking toward the person who had saved him, each step deliberate, each breath still a little fragile. He paused near Naomi's porch and looked at the neighbors before speaking. "You judged a jacket," he said, "but she saw a human being." The words carried like a low bell ringing through the block. Even the wind seemed to pause. People shifted uneasily. Some looked at the ground. Others looked directly at Naomi, seeing her in a new light. Still afraid, still confused, but suddenly aware that they had jumped to the worst conclusion. Ryder continued, "2 nights ago, I collapsed on the cold pavement of a gas station. People walked past me. People turned away. One man even told her to keep walking." He pointed at Naomi gently, but she didn't. Naomi's eyes stung. She held Leah a little closer. Ryder raised his voice slightly. "She spent the last $9 she had, her daughter's breakfast money, to buy the medicine that kept me alive until help came." A wave of shock moved through the crowd. Mrs. Whitaker's hand dropped from her mouth. "9?" she whispered. Mr. Harris's anger folded into shame. She didn't mention that. Ryder turned, addressing the whole street now. "We're Hope Road Foundation. We help families when no one else can. We've helped 3,600 people over the years. Veterans, single parents, grandparents raising children, folks who fell through every crack the system left." Suddenly, a voice broke from the crowd. A man in a faded jacket raised his hand. "You helped my cousin in Detroit," he said. "Got him into housing. The man was sleeping under bridges." Another voice followed. "You paid for my son's heart surgery 2 years ago. I never forgot that." A third voice trembled out. "You saved my grandmother's house from foreclosure." Recognition swept across the street like a warm gust. People who had feared the engines now saw faces they knew, faces they owed something to. The air changed. Eyes softened, shoulders lowered. Mrs. Whitaker wiped tears from her cheeks. "Naomi," she whispered, I misjudged you." Mr. Harris lowered his head. "We all did." Naomi swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the sudden turn. Humiliation cracked into relief. Fear dissolved into understanding. Her heart felt too full of everything she had held in for years. Then Ryder stepped closer and spoke directly to her. "You saved my life with $9 and a choice," he said gently. "And I don't let debts like that go unanswered." The riders behind him nodded, some placing hands over their vests as if sealing a quiet vow. Naomi felt Leah's small hand tighten around hers. "Mommy," Leah whispered, "they're not scary anymore." "No," Naomi said softly, her voice trembling. "They never were." For the first time that morning, she believed it. The street had turned on her with fear, but now, under the weight of truth, it was turning back. with something far stronger: respect. The moment Ryder Cole finished speaking, the air on Brook Street shifted again. This time slower, warmer, like the first breath after a storm passes. Neighbors stood still, trying to connect the image in their minds. The intimidating biker jackets, the roaring engines, with the truth they had just been handed. A single mother with $9 and a choice. A dying man, a moment of courage. Naomi Brooks felt exposed beneath everyone's gaze, but for the first time that morning, the eyes on her no longer cut. They softened. Ryder stepped closer, his boots thudding gently against the pavement. He paused at the steps of her porch, as if asking permission without words. Naomi gave a small nod. He climbed the last 2 steps and reached into his jacket pocket. "Naomi," he said, voice steady but filled with a kind of reverence she didn't understand. "You saved me. You saved someone people depend on. And gratitude, real gratitude, moves differently in our world." He placed a white envelope into her hand. It was heavier than she expected. She felt the thickness before she even opened it, the weight of paper and meaning pressed together. Her heart stumbled in her chest. "What is this?" she whispered. "Help," Ryder said simply. "The same kind you gave me." Her fingers trembled as she slid the folded check halfway out. She read the handwritten amount twice, certain she'd misread the first time. $28,000. She drew in a sharp breath, nearly dropping the envelope. "I can't take this," she said quickly, shaking her head. "This is too much. I don't even—" Ryder lifted a hand gently, stopping her. "It's not charity. It's recompense. You stopped in the dark when others walked away. You didn't pause to ask who I was. You didn't hesitate. You didn't judge. You just helped." His eyes softened. "Let us help too." Dean Parker walked up with a manila folder tucked under his arm. He gave Naomi a small nod, then handed her the folder with both hands, almost ceremonially. "This is the second part," Dean said, the part Ryder insisted on. Naomi opened the folder slowly. Inside was a letter printed on crisp paper, the winged crown at the top. She read the words through a blur. "Hope Road Foundation offering employment. Community coordinator, compensation. Steady income with health coverage beginning on the first day." She covered her mouth. I don't know how to do this kind of work." "Yes, you do," Dean said. "You did it 2 nights ago, with nothing in your pocket but courage." Ryder nodded. "Hope Road needs hearts like yours. Hearts that don't wait for a spotlight to do the right thing." Naomi felt her knees weaken, the gravity of the moment pressing into her. "I've never had coverage," she whispered without thinking, the truth slipping out raw. "Not even when Leah was born." Leah looked up at her mother, confused by the emotion in her voice, then tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, what's coverage?" Naomi knelt, brushing a hand through her daughter's hair. "It means someone is finally taking care of us too." Behind them, the trailer truck backed up slowly. The beep echoed off the apartment buildings. When it settled, a few riders jumped down and swung the back doors open. The entire neighborhood leaned in. Inside were boxes stacked neatly. Groceries, bags of rice and beans, crates of fruit, a set of pots and pans wrapped in brown paper. Next to them, a small bed frame painted white with a lavender blanket folded at the foot. A stuffed rabbit rested on the pillow. Leah's eyes widened. She whispered, "Is that for me?" Ryder smiled. "It is." The little girl clapped her hands once and darted forward before Naomi could stop her. She pressed her face into the blanket, as if she wanted to memorize the softness of it. "Mommy, look, look." Naomi's throat closed. "It's beautiful," she said, tears slipping free. "Groceries, furniture, things for the apartment," Dean explained. "You've been surviving for too long. We want you to live." Yet even as the generosity poured in, the morning still held the memory of fear from earlier. Naomi turned to the neighbors, people who had once looked at her with suspicion, who had whispered behind their doors just an hour ago. Mrs. Whitaker stepped through the crowd, both hands over her chest. "Naomi, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "We judged you. We judged them. We judged everything we didn't understand." Mr. Harris cleared his throat, unable to meet Naomi's eyes. "You didn't bring trouble to this block. You brought grace. We were too afraid to see it." Ryder turned to the neighbors gently. "Fear spreads fast, but kindness can spread faster if you let it." It was the way he said it, quiet, not demanding, that made the words land softly. One by one, neighbors approached the truck, not out of fear, but out of willingness. Some lifted boxes, some carried furniture, some simply offered small words of apology, of awe, of thanks. Inside the apartment, people organized the groceries, folded blankets, assembled the small bed. Children peeked through the doorway, curious and shy, until Leah waved them in to see her new blanket. Laughter filled the cramped living room. Pot lids clattered. Someone opened a window, letting warm sunlight spill across the floor. Naomi stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed by how quickly the street had turned from cold fear to communal warmth. Every breath felt new. Ryder stepped beside her, leaning against the doorway with a groan of healing ribs. "This isn't the end, Naomi," he said. "This is the beginning." She blinked through tears. "The beginning of what?" "The beginning of something bigger than all of us," he said. "Tomorrow we start drawing up plans." "Plans?" He nodded. "A place for families like yours, like the ones we've served. A hub for help, for growth, for safety, right here on Brook Street. And we want you leading it." Naomi gasped softly. "You're building a center." "Not just any center," Ryder said. "Brooks Haven, named for the person who reminded us why we do what we do." A laugh escaped her, half joy, half disbelief. "You can't name it after me?" Dean shrugged. "Too late. Paperwork's in my backpack." Naomi covered her face, shaking her head as tears streamed down her cheeks. Tears, not of fear this time, but relief. Then a tiny voice whispered beside her. "Mommy," Leah said, tugging the hem of her shirt, "do we live in a dream now?" Naomi knelt and pulled her close. "No, baby," she said softly. "We live in a neighborhood." Outside, the engines sat silent. No longer thunder, but steady anchors. Quiet symbols of a promise kept. And for the first time in years, Naomi Brooks felt something she almost couldn't name. Safety, belonging. The first outline of a future shaped not by survival, but by hope. The morning after the street transformed from fear into community, Naomi Brooks opened her eyes to a sound she hadn't heard in years. Silence that felt safe. No alarms, no arguments in the hallway, no footsteps rushing past her door on their way to early shifts. Just a soft quiet, warm and whole, wrapped around her like a blanket. For a few seconds, she didn't move. She lay there listening to Leah breathing gently beside her, the first rays of daylight touching the lavender blanket the Ryders had brought. The corners of the room glowed, and for the first time in a long time, Naomi didn't dread the day ahead. She felt expectant. like the world had tilted, but this time not to bring trouble, only possibility. Downstairs, someone knocked lightly. "Naomi?" It was Ryder's voice, steady, respectful. "You awake?" She swung her legs over the bed, smoothing her hair as she went to the door. When she opened it, Ryder stood there with a rolled tube beneath his arm, and Dean Parker beside him, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Their jackets were off. Their shirts were simple. They looked less like a thunderstorm and more like neighbors, weathered by the road, but grounded. "Morning," Dean said, handing her a cup. "Good morning," she replied. It still felt strange, standing in her doorway with people who, hours earlier, had filled her street with engines. But the strangeness carried no fear, only gratitude. Ryder lifted the large tube. "May we come in?" "Of course," Naomi said, stepping aside. Inside the apartment, sunlight washed across the new furniture the bikers had carried in the day before. The small bed in the corner, Leah's blankets folded with care, the groceries stacked neatly on the counter. Even the air felt different, lighter, as if it remembered all the hands that had touched this space with kindness. Ryder laid the tube across the table and unfurled it, spreading the sheets with both hands. Blueprints, thick pages, lines drawn with precision, notes scrawled in tidy handwriting across the margins. Naomi leaned closer, tracing the outlines with her eyes. "What is this?" she asked softly. "It's Brooks Haven," Ryder said. "Or it will be." Dean added, "A place for families who need support, job training, after-school programs, a pantry, a small clinic, meeting rooms, classes, a safe space for anyone who's falling through the cracks." Naomi stared at the blueprint, overwhelmed. You're really building this? Here?" Ryder smiled, faint but sure. Hope Road Foundation started with only a promise, but this? He tapped the sheet lightly. "This is our next chapter, and we want you to lead it." Naomi blinked, her breath catching. "Me?" "You," Dean said. "You understand the people we want to serve. You've lived the struggle, you've lived the courage, and you've lived the choice." Naomi touched the blueprint again, the reality settling slowly. She remembered Grandma Etta's voice, soft but certain, telling her that kindness costs nothing. She remembered the small journal entries she wrote every night, clinging to gratitude even when the world gave her nothing but sighs. And she remembered the man on the pavement, Ryder gasping for air, eyes wide with fear, before she knelt beside him. Everything pointed to this moment. Before she could answer, a small voice piped up from the hallway. "Is that a map?" Leah rubbed her eyes, her curls sticking out in sleepy directions. Ryder knelt so he was level with her, his knees cracking as he lowered himself. "It is," he said warmly. "A map for a new place we're going to build, a place meant to help people, a place your mom will help lead." Leah's eyes widened. "Like a hero center?" Ryder chuckled. "Something like that." Naomi exhaled a laugh. "Let's not call it that." Dean grinned. "We could call it a kindness center." She shook her head, smiling. "Please don't." But the humor softened the room, made it feel like home. Later that afternoon, Naomi followed Ryder and Dean to a vacant lot a few blocks down. It had once been a community garden before the funding dried up and weeds claimed ownership. The soil was cracked, and a rusted fence leaned at odd angles, but sunlight bathed the space like it still believed in what it could become. "This is where Brooks Haven will stand," Ryder said. Naomi stepped carefully onto the uneven ground. "It doesn't look like much." Dean nodded thoughtfully. "Most things worth building don't at first." She knelt, brushing her hand across the earth. It felt warm, full of history and waiting. She imagined children running across the yard, elders sitting on benches, new mothers carrying toddlers into a clinic where someone would say, "Let me help." She imagined shelves filled with food, people gathering in rooms to rebuild their lives piece by fragile piece. A quiet sound drew Naomi's attention. Trevor, the gas station attendant, stood at the edge of the lot, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense, his gaze unsure. He walked slowly toward them, his voice awkward. "I heard y'all were down here." Dean nodded politely. "Afternoon." Trevor breathed in, unsteady. "I saw what happened yesterday, that whole street. I wasn't expecting it." He looked at Naomi, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry for what I said that night. I didn't know." Naomi nodded gently. "Sometimes we learn the hard way." He swallowed. "If you're building something here, I can help. I've got Thursdays off. I could volunteer." Ryder stepped forward and shook his hand. "We'd be glad to have you." Naomi smiled softly. "Thank you, Trevor." As he walked away, she felt something settle in her chest, a small but steady warmth. Forgiveness didn't erase hurt, but it changed direction. It opened space for something new to grow. That evening, neighbors gathered around the lot, curious about the bright blueprints pinned to a wooden board. Some offered advice, others offered tools. Children chased each other through the tall weeds, their laughter ringing like chimes. Naomi stood at the center of it all, Leah's hand in hers, Ryder and Dean by her side. The block alive with voices that just days earlier had been full of fear. The wind lifted the corner of the blueprint, and Naomi pressed it flat again, her palm warming the paper. She looked out at the people gathering, once divided, now united by something as simple and powerful as $9 and a choice. It was no longer just a plan on paper. It was a beginning. By the end of the week, the empty lot on Brook Street no longer felt like the forgotten patch of earth it had been for years. Its soil held footprints now, children running through weeds, neighbors passing between clusters of bikes, workers rolling paint swatches across battered boards. And standing quietly among them, Naomi Brooks felt something she hadn't felt in years, belonging that didn't need permission. But the world beyond the neighborhood had begun to notice, too. It started with a moment. One tiny, shaky clip filmed by a teenager standing across the street the day the riders arrived. The clip wasn't fancy. It wasn't edited. It caught a trembling Naomi holding her daughter on their porch. It showed Ryder stepping toward her. It captured the crowd shifting from fear into understanding. It caught Leah's little gasp when the trailer doors opened to reveal her new bed. The teenager uploaded it with a simple caption, "This is what kindness looks like." By midnight, the clip had traveled across half the city. By morning, it had been shared thousands of times. People paused between morning chores and office meetings to watch the moment a street changed its mind. They watched the wave of engines arriving not with violence, but gratitude. They watched a woman who had almost nothing pour kindness into a stranger, and watched that kindness echo back at her with the power of 100 engines. And the internet, as it always does, had opinions. Some comments were gentle. This is what community is supposed to be. Faith in humanity restored. Others were hostile. Don't glamorize biker gangs. She got lucky, could have gone the other way. This is staged, and the harshest, she put her kid in danger for strangers. When Naomi saw the first wave of comments, her stomach twisted. She held her phone like it weighed a stone, unable to decide whether to read more or delete everything. For a moment, she felt the same cold fear she had felt when the engines first arrived. Anonymous opinions had a way of cracking old wounds open. Dean Parker noticed the hesitation in her eyes during their morning meeting at the lot. He took the phone gently from her hands and locked it. "Let me handle the noise," he said. "You focus on the work. The work will speak louder than any comment." "But people think," Naomi began. Dean shook his head. "People think a lot of things when they're looking at a screen. The truth is right here on this dirt." He waved his hand at the volunteers hammering planks into place. "You're building something real. Let us deal with the digital weather." Naomi breathed in slowly. She didn't want Ryder or Dean to shield her, not really, but she also didn't want to disappear into a storm of strangers' opinions. So she nodded. "Okay, just don't hide anything from me." "Never," Dean promised. By midday, the lot buzzed with energy. Volunteers lifted lumber, poured fresh paint, and cleared debris. Children tugged at their parents' hands, whispering excitedly about the Hero Center, a nickname Naomi tried to discourage but secretly found sweet. At one point, Rosa Fields from the laundromat showed up carrying 2 thermoses of coffee and a tray of muffins. "You can't build kindness on an empty stomach," she said, placing the tray onto a makeshift table. Naomi hugged her with one arm, balancing a stack of papers with the other. "Thank you, Rosa." "You're doing good work," Rosa said. Then she lowered her voice. "Also, you're famous now. Someone at the laundromat said you're all over the internet. I told them you're too sensible to let strangers online bother you." She winked. "But if anyone gets mean, you send them to me. I'll handle them." Naomi smiled despite herself. Rosa always had a way of turning worry into warmth. Later that afternoon, the mayor's office posted publicly about the clip. City officials visited the lot, arriving with clipboards and questions. One of them, a councilwoman with kind eyes, approached Naomi with a handshake. "Brooks Haven," she said thoughtfully. "That's a beautiful name. You've built a spark here. We'd like to help turn it into light." The words startled Naomi. She wasn't used to being seen, let alone praised by people whose offices normally felt a universe away from her life. Ryder stood at her shoulder, nodding. "Told you. Bigger than all of us." While officials walked the lot, filming crews arrived, small ones at first, then larger ones as the story spread. Naomi found herself answering questions she never imagined giving answers to. "What made you stop? That night? I saw someone who needed help." "Weren't you afraid?" "Yes. But fear doesn't get to choose my humanity." "What do you hope happens next?" "For people to understand each other, to see past fear." It wasn't long before someone printed the words onto posters, then onto shirts, then onto a banner that hung from the rusty fence. "Choose people first." When Naomi saw it, she pressed a hand to her chest. As dusk approached, people held up their phones to take pictures. A few more uploaded videos from new angles. The greeting, the apologies, the collective labor of neighbors building together. The clip of Leah touching the lavender blanket became the most shared moment. Something about a child finding unexpected gentleness resonated with strangers far beyond Brook Street. But with reach came backlash again. Naomi saw it when Dean reluctantly handed her the phone to keep her informed. A harsh post read, "This woman is getting rewarded for endangering her child. This isn't kindness, it's recklessness." Naomi exhaled quietly. She wasn't angry, just tired. But before she could slide the phone into her pocket, A flood of positive comments followed. She did what any decent human should. This mother deserves the world. Hope Road saved my family. Trust them. This is the kind of story I want my kids to see. The wave of support rose quickly, pushing the negativity to the edges. Ryder leaned over her shoulder. "You see?" he murmured. "The truth has stronger legs." By the time the sun dipped below the rooftops, fresh concrete had been poured for the foundation. Neighbors gathered, standing shoulder to shoulder, palms pressed into the air as if blessing the last rays of daylight. Children wrote their initials in the wet cement. Leah wrote a small heart. City officials took photos. Volunteers clapped. A gentle wind carried bits of dust through the air, sparkling briefly in the amber sunset. Then the first banner was lifted into place. 3 words, centered in bold letters: "Choose people first." Naomi felt the tears rise again, but this time they were soft, grateful tears, the kind that slide down a face without heaviness. She squeezed Leah's hand. "Look, baby, that's our message." Leah nodded solemnly. "It's a good one." As the last workers packed up, the block hummed with quiet pride. Phones buzzed with new comments, new shares, new stories from strangers who had been touched by the video. Brook Street, once forgotten, was now known, not for fear, but for transformation. And as Naomi watched the banner sway gently in the evening breeze, she realized something profound. The world had not simply noticed her story. It had joined it. The seasons did what they always do. They passed quietly, one after another, reshaping the city in ways people barely noticed. But on Brook Street, the changes were not subtle. They arrived in steady waves, each one carving a new chapter in the life Naomi Brooks had never dared to imagine. 18 months had slipped by since the morning the engines thundered through her block, and now the neighborhood pulsed with a different kind of noise. Hammers tapping, children laughing, footsteps of volunteers coming and going like a heartbeat that never faltered. Month 1 began with a desk. A simple wooden desk placed inside a half-renovated office with a single window overlooking the lot that would become Brooks Haven. On it sat a nameplate carved cleanly in warm cedar. Naomi Brooks, Community Coordinator. Her hands trembled the first time she touched it, not because of the title but because of what it meant. A life outside survival. A seat at a table she had once only walked past. The air inside the unfinished building smelled of sawdust and new beginnings. Leah would do her homework in the corner while Naomi sorted intake forms, schedules, food donations, and requests from people who had heard whispers that help lived here now. It wasn't always easy. Some days were slow, some were loud, some were filled with stories too heavy to carry alone. But each one reminded Naomi of why she had said yes. By month 2, the framing of the center stood tall. Wooden beams rose in neat rows, casting striped shadows across the ground like bars of sunlight. Teenagers from the high school painted a mural along the fence, 2 open hands holding a road that stretched toward a distant horizon. Beneath it, they wrote, "Kindness leads somewhere." Naomi watched them paint while sipping hot chocolate brought by Mrs. Whitaker, who had taken to visiting almost daily. "This place is going to do good things," Mrs. Whitaker said one afternoon, adjusting her sunglasses as she admired the mural. "I can feel it." Naomi smiled. "It already has." Month 3 brought a different kind of challenge, one that reminded her why Brooks Haven mattered. She found him sleeping in his car behind the corner store, a 32-year-old veteran named Jordan, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. The cold had crept into his bones. His belongings were piled in a single duffel bag. Naomi approached softly so she wouldn't startle him. "Sir, are you okay?" He blinked awake, startled, then embarrassed. "I'm fine," he lied, "just, resting." She recognized the exhaustion in his voice. She had lived that kind of tired. She offered him a warm drink and a seat inside the nearly finished center. At first he refused. Then he accepted with shaking hands. Within weeks, Jordan was inside a safe room at Brooks Haven. A month later, he had steady work and a routine that made sense again. The first time Naomi saw him smile, the curve felt like another beam locking into place in the growing structure of the community. By month 4, Brooks Haven opened its doors for the first time. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest. No flashing cameras, no elaborate speeches. Just neighbors, volunteers, and a few riders standing quietly in the back, their jackets clean and pressed. 40 people found help that first day. Families receiving groceries, elders checking in with the small clinic, young adults signing up for job skills classes. Naomi moved from room to room, answering questions, offering comfort, connecting people who needed each other more than they realized. She didn't know when she started smiling without effort. She only noticed it when Leah said, "You smile more now, Mommy. It looks nice." As the months rolled on, Hope Road Foundation expanded beyond Brook Street. Another center sprouted 3 blocks away, then another in a nearby neighborhood that had long felt forgotten. The network grew like a tree, spreading roots through the concrete, lifting pockets of the city that had been left behind. Dean Parker trained new coordinators, many of whom were people Brooks Haven had helped. One woman who had escaped an unsafe home became a counselor. A teenager who once sat quietly in the corner during tutoring sessions became a volunteer mentor for younger kids. Jordan, the veteran, began teaching basic car repair in the community workshop the riders built behind the center. Ryder, still healing slowly from the health scare that had nearly taken him away, became the quiet anchor of every center. People called him Uncle Ryder, a nickname he pretended not to like, though he always smiled when he heard it. He would sit under the shade of a tree outside Brooks Haven, talking to anyone who needed to feel heard. One afternoon, 18 months after Naomi saved him, Ryder arrived with a cane in one hand and a bag of fresh oranges in the other. He watched as Naomi sorted supplies for the pantry. "You've built something," he said, pressing an orange into her palm. "Something good." "We built it," she corrected. He chuckled. "Fair enough." As the 1.5-year mark approached, the neighborhood transformed. The streets were cleaner. The nights felt calmer. Children walked home from school laughing, not rushing. The grocery store added fresh produce. A small library corner opened inside the community center, filled with donated books. Neighbors who once kept their curtains shut now left them open to the evening light. And then, one afternoon, as Naomi was reviewing schedules at her desk, she noticed someone hovering in the doorway. Trevor. He held a disposable cup of coffee awkwardly, unsure where to look. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. "I was there," he whispered. "That night at the gas station, when you made that choice." Naomi nodded. "I remember." "I should have helped," he said quietly. "I didn't, but you did, and it changed everything." He swallowed. "I'd like to volunteer. Thursdays, if you'll have me." Naomi's smile was soft, but certain. "We'd be glad to have you." He returned that smile with a shaky breath and handed her the cup. "Coffee's on me. Least I can do." When Trevor walked away, Naomi opened her journal, the same one where she wrote her nightly gratitudes. Her handwriting had grown steadier over the months, her entries fuller. She wrote, "Today, someone who once walked away, walked back." As evening settled across Brook Street, She stepped outside to watch the sun dip behind the rooftops. The air smelled faintly of sawdust, oranges, and the warm promise of tomorrow. Children chased each other in the yard behind the center, volunteers locked up for the night. Somewhere, an engine rumbled softly as a rider passed through. Less like thunder now, more like a lullaby woven into the rhythm of the block. And Naomi felt the truth settle into her bones. Kindness had not only echoed, it had multiplied. 18 months after the night that changed everything, Brooks Haven buzzed with gentle celebration. The sun was slipping low, turning the building's windows into squares of soft amber light. Inside the center, voices mingled. Laughter, quiet conversation, the clatter of plates being arranged on long tables. The community had gathered to mark the anniversary of the day the engines first roared down Brook Street, a day that had once carried fear and now carried pride. Naomi adjusted the collar of her simple blouse and looked around the room with a quiet sense of wonder. So many faces. Faces she had seen in moments of struggle, then seen again in moments of rebuilding. Children who had outgrown the shoes they'd arrived in. Elders who no longer had to choose between medication and groceries. Parents who walked into job training unsure of themselves and now stood with renewed confidence. Brooks Haven no longer looked like the rough sketches Ryder had laid out on her kitchen table a year and a half before. It was real. It was alive. And tonight, every room glowed with the warmth of people who had been part of its story. Ryder Cole stood near the stage, cane in one hand, greeting guests as they passed. His hair had grown a bit longer, his face softer with recovery. People called him Uncle Ryder again tonight, and though he shook his head each time, the fondness in his eyes betrayed him. Dean Parker circulated through the crowd, shaking hands, hugging old friends, filling cups with lemonade. Children ran up to him occasionally, waving drawings they'd made in the after-school program. He would crouch down, study each picture carefully, and offer genuine praise as if he had nowhere else to be. And over by the dessert table, Leah helped arrange cookies in neat spirals. She looked older now, still young, but with the first hints of confidence blooming behind her eyes. When she looked up and saw Naomi watching, she waved proudly. Naomi waved back, her heart swelling. Mrs. Whitaker stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room. Her once nervous voice had gained steadiness over the past year. She tapped the microphone gently. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," she said, adjusting her glasses. Conversation settled, children quieted, the room shifted into a collective hush. "I'd like to say something," Mrs. Whitaker began. "A year and a half ago, I was one of the people who misread a moment. I saw jackets and engines and fear. I saw a group of people I didn't understand, and a mother I didn't give the benefit of the doubt. I was wrong." She paused, her eyes searching the crowd until they landed on Naomi. "I want to thank you, Naomi, for showing what courage looks like. You taught our block, and me, that sometimes fear is loud, but kindness is stronger." A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Naomi blinked back emotion as Mrs. Whitaker stepped down, touching Naomi's shoulder gently before joining the crowd again. Then Mr. Harris approached the microphone. He cleared his throat, his voice deep and rough. "I'll say it plain," he said. "I judged you, Naomi. Before you spoke. Before I knew anything at all. Turns out you had more backbone than all of us combined. I'm grateful for you." He stepped down quickly, embarrassed, but Naomi caught the gratitude in his eyes. Dean walked onto the stage next. "Tonight," he said softly, "is about what grows from one choice. one moment. One person seeing another person. He stepped aside, gesturing for Naomi. Naomi's heart fluttered. Public speaking had never been her strength, but she walked forward slowly, guided by the sense that the room wasn't expecting perfection. Only honesty. When she reached the microphone, she took a brief breath. A year and a half ago, she began. I had $9 left. 9. And I had to choose. Hold tight to what I had or help a stranger who couldn't breathe. She paused, remembering the gas station lights, the cold pavement, the heaviness of fear. I chose a person, she said simply, and that choice chose me back. A soft wave passed through the room. Nods, lowered eyes, gentle murmurs. Everything you see here, she continued, sweeping her hand toward the walls of Brookshaven, started with that moment. But it only grew because people kept choosing each other, choosing kindness, choosing to stay when it was easier to walk away. She looked toward Ryder and Dean, toward Jordan, the veteran, toward Rosa, toward Trevor, who now handed out fresh fruit in the pantry twice a week. This center isn't about what I did, she said. It's about what we did, every one of us. We built this place together. Applause rose, not thunderous but warm, like a blanket being placed gently around the shoulders of the room. When Naomi stepped off the stage, Leah ran to her, wrapping her arms around her waist. You talked great, Mommy, she said. Best speech ever. Naomi laughed softly. Thank you, baby. The evening lingered with food and music and stories. Neighbors shared memories of the early days, the dusty lot, the viral video, the first time the pantry ran out of milk, and the riders showed up an hour later with an entire truckload. People swapped laughs, tears, and small victories. Near the end of the night, Naomi stepped outside for a breath of cool air. The street was quiet, glowing under the warm halo of the street lamps. A few bikes were parked along the curb, their chrome catching the light in soft reflections. It reminded her of the morning everything changed, the roar of engines, the fear in her neighbor's eyes, the trembling question in Leah's voice. Tonight, the engines rested peacefully. She walked slowly toward home, carrying Leah's drawings and a plate covered in foil. The night air brushed her cheeks gently. Halfway down the block, she noticed a flicker of movement near the gas station. A young man stood beside an old sedan, hood lifted, hands shaking. His clothes were worn. His eyes were wide with that particular kind of desperation Naomi recognized instantly. The desperation of someone trying to hold together a life that kept slipping through their fingers. When he saw her, he straightened nervously. "Ma'am?" he said, voice thin with worry. "Do you know if any buses run this late? I'm trying to get across town. My little one's waiting for me." Naomi stepped closer. The faint glow from the streetlight fell across his exhausted face. He couldn't have been more than 22. A new father, maybe. Trying. She reached slowly into her purse and pulled out a folded bill, $40 softly pressed into his palm. His eyes widened. "Ma'am, I can't." "You can," she said gently. "And when life lets you, pass it on." Then she reached into her pocket again and handed him a small card with the winged crown. "If you need real help, come to Brookshaven. They won't turn you away." The young man stared at the card, his eyes glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. Naomi nodded and walked away, the night settling around her like a familiar friend. When she reached her apartment, Leah was already drifting to sleep. Naomi opened her gratitude journal and wrote, 1. A beginning turned into a home. 2. Fear became understanding. 3. Another circle began tonight. Outside, far in the distance, an engine rumbled softly. Not thunder, just a lullaby in the dark. Not a threat, a promise. Kindness had completed its circle, and now it was starting a new one.